Hello, happy new year. Welcome to Helicopter Investor 21. Welcome to the first town hall of 2021. Very kindly sponsored by Aero Asset. If you haven't worked that out so far, delighted to have five real experts in this market who are going to be taking, I'm hoping it's five, we're hoping Clark will be able to get on. But let's start straight away with Will Sturm, VP Sales, Aero Asset, coming to us from Paris. Will, how are you?
Great, Al. How you doing? Good to see your face. Good to see everybody's face.
Sorry?
Good to see everybody's face.
Yeah, it's nice to see you. It's great. So, it's first one of the year. What's your New Year's resolution?
We were talking about that. I think, I want to pull off a publicity stunt as good as Steve Varsano did for the jet business. I think that's somehow he was able to get in the news from his house without doing any, just throwing a party with he and his wife. So if I can pull off something that good, that'd be a definite New Year's resolution completed.
And if you haven't seen that story, go to Corporate Investor. Okay, so Aero Assets just produced your quarterly report on what's going on in the market. What's your prediction for 2021?
Well, I think it's interesting to look back a little bit on where we've come from. It's amazing to think that the first month of 2021 is already coming to a close. And what's happened in Q1, I kind of get the same feeling of what I had when Q4 2020 was closing out, and it's somewhat of an ambivalent read on what's going on out there. Because Aero Asset, we had a really good quarter in Q4, one of our strongest really we've ever had, and a number of deals pending we were able to carry over and are still working right now and closing some. So Q1 started off good for us. It's been a very good footing, but I still have this overall feeling of reservation. The fact is, Al, like looking forward, we really we don't have any visibility on what's going to happen in the next 6 to 12 months, coming out of COVID. So it's kind of a challenge to really know where we're going to be and really to give you a prediction on 2021.
Okay, what in your report, what aircraft are trading at the moment?
Well, to take a close look at retail sales in Q4. So if we focus on Q4, we estimated 116 million worth of on-off market twin engine pre-owned supply was sold to retail buyers. That's a 22% increase over Q3, and but it's important to note that is 25% off the mark of Q4 2019 numbers. But it is encouraging given the fact of where the market was in Q2 of 2020. I was thinking about it earlier today, Al. 1 year ago today, most of us were at HAI in Anaheim, and then a month later we were with you in London for this very show. And I kind of remember you had a few of the panels. COVID was definitely a topic of conversation with some kind of concern, giggling, or what's going to happen. But we didn't really feel the fallout until about a month or so afterwards. And case in point, we had a deal that spooled up at your show, and then it kind of went on life support. And because we had an inspector in another country that had to leave before the country went lockdown. So that's something we never really had to deal with. So buyers kind of went into a wait and see mentality, and then but the big struggle to get deals done at that time was really logistical barriers. So we've kind of gotten past that. I think a lot of brokers and sellers and buyers just had to find a way to get deals done. There's a great quote from Robert Evans, the Hollywood director, who said, the impossible becomes possible when your back's up against the wall, and it kind of felt like that to get deals done. But looking at the other parts of the market, supply in Q4, we saw a 16% increase of the twin engine supply for sale, and then Q4, actually that was a Q3 2020, and then in Q4 we had an additional 8% of available aircraft, and absorption rate improved in Q4 compared to Q3, especially in the medium segment. But just to note, that's about 50% higher than Q4 19 levels. The big surprise in Q4 was the deal pipeline, and that's what we use to track the number of deals pending at various stages of a transaction. And Q4 we saw a rise in the amounts of deals pending for the first time, pretty much following 4 consecutive quarters of decline. So again, I really have a cautious sense of optimism moving forward, because we're kind of starting to finally get a glimpse of what the post-COVID market environment will be like.
Are there any markets where you can't get hold of a helicopter?
It's not so much. It's interesting right now. It's not so much a model market as opposed to later model aircraft with the latest technology. In the most, if you take a look at our Q4 report, which is published on our website, and you can sign up for it to get them all the time. The major trading markets have been the EC-135s, the 109s, the 145s. They're really the most liquid, and late model aircraft are really, availability has been dried up. So those are the kind of the hardest aircraft to get your hands on at this time.
Where are the buyers coming from, or what types are they?
They're coming from everywhere, Al. We've done deals all over the world. Obviously there's a majority of demand is coming from North America and Europe, but we've done deals everywhere.
And not sector specific.
There's always demand, coming from certain sectors. But case in point, like about 1/3, a little more than 1/3 of buyers were utility EMS, but the rest were VIP, and configuration that's a configuration that's still been very popular. That's dominated. Over 2/3 of the buyers in the last 2 quarters have been VIP buyers. So I think that's really where what's interesting at the moment.
So a lot of people are talking about a K-shaped recession where some companies doing really well, some companies doing badly. Have you seen any distressed sellers? No, and to be honest, I've seen, nothing out of the ordinary from what I would see on a regular basis of a distressed sale here and there. A few knee-jerk reactions probably happened right after, when we were on super lockdown, but I haven't seen any notable trend in terms of distressed asset sales. And financiers, you've not seen anyone at all trying to get rid of anything. It's weird, isn't it? No, not really. I think this whole situation has perhaps pushed sellers to really evaluate their pricing, especially with aircraft that have been on the market for a long time, and that's when deals start to happen. So yeah, I see the market, in my opinion, seems rather healthy. And how do you think the OEMs are doing? From what I've seen, and I think they're delivering aircraft. Their prices are remaining. Their price points are strong. I don't see a lot of fire sales on any aircraft, and most of the markets that I track and in the pre-owned segment and sell, it's still long lead times to get aircraft, and I think it's business as usual, which is really good. So it's positive. Absolutely. Absolutely. I guess final question, easy one. When's it all going to be over? Well, like I said, I live in Paris. I haven't seen a selfie stick since I moved here 6 months ago. And when it was open, you could go to the Louvre and not even wait in line to see anything. So I think when there's a line coming out the Louvre, I'll know we're over it. I'll let you know. Okay, cool. Thanks so much, Rob.
Cheers, guys. Thanks, Al.
Okay, let's now switch from trading to financing. Delighted to have Sebastien Moulin, head of Europe and Americas at Milestone. How are you?
I am very well, thank you. And yourself?
Good, thanks. So you're enjoying lockdown in Ireland?
Yeah, lovely. It's been a year. I've spent time at home, so never thought of this ever. But yeah.
And it's great that you've got this as an excuse to get away from homeschooling.
Fair point.
You've said it's 4 hours. So how was 2020 for Milestone?
Well, no doubt that the world is way different than what it was at the start of 2020 when last time we met, right? So, but I think look, the first conclusions and what we have seen over the years that the fundamentals of the business have been holding, and the asset class we are in, on the helicopter side has truly demonstrated that they are mission critical aircraft, and the service has been continuing despite the crisis. So. And that's all remarkable, and thanks to our operators and user and customers that have been able to kind of adjust to those challenges due to the COVID. If you look at from segment perspective and starting with the oil and gas, no doubt that the oil demand has been affected, and some of the projects that we had anticipated to come online with exploration have been delayed or paused or even cancelled for now. But I think what we've seen over the years is that the flight hours, although they dropped at the start of the crisis, they came back up. Through the summer, from the summertime through the rest of the year, we've sort of seen that the fleet was back flying pretty much at the level that it was pre-COVID. And again, I think that's remarkable, and that's an incredible work that the operators have done, the end users, and also us and our team trying to assist the segment the best way possible. The rest of the fleet outside of oil and gas, pretty much doing the same, and kind of all the EMS, SAW, and wind farm operations have continued. We've been closely monitoring the situation, speaking to our customers on a daily basis, and haven't had any major issue due to the COVID situation. So, it kind of gave us comfort that, the diversification we've been focusing on for the last 5 years, and really kind of trying to maintain that mix of, 60% oil and gas and 40% for the other segment, was the right one. And that's what allowed us to, continue being committed to the space and investing in this space as well. So I think in 2020, we've done about 65 transactions, which is pretty much, the level of transactions we've done in the previous years. And that included additional investment, volume investments, where it was making sense for us and for the customers and the operators. And I think in general, we've also worked with our OEM partners. We've announced last year that we were investing in the 160, and that's also the same. It's kind of we got comfort that this platform was the right one for us in terms of portfolio multi-mission, and that was the right thing to do for us to be ready for the future. So I think that's all in all the view of 2020.
Okay, so how optimistic are you about 2021? Are you seeing recovery?
Well, as Will said, I think it's hard to predict anything for 2021, right? So I would not take too many risks of saying what's going to happen. But if we are being pragmatic, and if we look at the signs that we've seen on the oil and gas side, again prior to the crisis, and the fact that most of the fleet has been continuing flying and being pretty stable, we do feel like those exploration projects are going to come back online. When exactly, I don't think anyone can say, but we've seen some positive signs, and we expect those to be hopefully from the second part of 2021. And at that time, I think our existing fleet will be ready to be deployed, and there is no question that there is still some sort of oversupply on the heavy side in particular, and we will be continuing to work closely with our customers and trying to find the right solutions for them. I think last year we've demonstrated that we could be creative in supporting the customer, like Cavaton, bringing in S92s into their fleet, which was the first type for them, and we not only provided the aircraft, we also financed the entry into service packages, and I think that's what made a difference for them, and we expect to continue doing this in 2021 with the right customers at the right place. So that's from the oil and gas perspective. Looking outside of oil and gas, I think the work we've done on the 225 will continue to be a main focus. What we have achieved here is incredible. The work done with the operators, with also Airbus as a partner. I don't think hopefully we'll be in a place to say very shortly that we've redeployed pretty much the entire 225 fleet on our side, which I don't think anyone would have expected a few years ago. And we've continued invested in it, and it paid off. So that will continue to be a main focus for us. And looking at the other segments, I mean, SAW is all over the news right now. We're clearly working on the UK campaigns, on the Irish campaigns coming up. We've done some work on Netherlands and Norway, and those are very important for us, as I said earlier. But also in one aspect that we want to maintain the key fundamentals for those opportunities. Meaning that what matters is also that the existing fleet continue to be used, and it's not only all about new toy and new helicopters technology. So we've got to find the right balance if we want to keep that space to be attractive and interesting for investors. So that would be a focus for us, and we want to be part of those conversations and not just wait for the outcome. And look, the last one, probably, I mean, the last two, it's EMS is always been like a strong pipeline for us and a strong segment. But the wind farm, I'm sure Steve is going to touch on this. I've read his report, always very good reports, and we've seen this over the last few years. We've placed quite a few of our light twin aircraft, some of the medium as well, and yeah, we're excited about the opportunity to support the renewable energy. So we'll be watching this carefully.
We've got a question from Sebastien Delmar, Aero Asset, going, how do you explain how flight hours in oil and gas segment have increased since the summer?
I don't think I said they have increased. I said they came back to what it was pre-COVID. And I think, look, from the feedback we got from our customer, it was more like, look, the initial drop was more like, how do we adjust to the current environment? How do we operate with, the restrictions that have been put in place by different governments? But they've walked around this. If you look at in different regions, sometimes they had to use bigger aircraft to respect some of the distance. And I think through the year, the more testing came along, and the more that they had protocol to follow, they could simply just get back to normal operations.
So, Sebastien, your job is to go out and get new leases and grow. What areas are you particularly excited about at the moment?
Well, look, I mean, the way I look at it is first, having access to capital and being backed by, GE and GCAS has been an incredible advantage for us right now. There is no questions that we can still look at growth, which I think is first what gets exciting for us and for me personally, because that's what, as you said, we are after, trying to bring new business for the company. And look, we have to be selective about where to deploy this capital. So, we've been looking at different opportunities, and we've done, purchase leaseback and some finance lease last year that were attractive for us, and we felt that, they were good business for our customers too. So that will continue to be, the first area where we will focus on, and that includes oil and gas, where it makes sense, where the terms make sense, and where the contracts are solid enough. And I think there is a lot of outside of oil and gas, there are a lot of opportunities as well. I mean, we've recently done a very good deal with NHV and the German Army, supporting like the new segment, military training, which was kind of new. And I think, look, the mix of our order book, some of the flexibility we could have with NHV and the OEMs, created a great opportunity for what we think will be a long-term partnership with them, and probably a lot more to come. So those new segments are clearly exciting, and as I said, I think we will continue to watch some of the movements into the renewable energy and the wind farm aspect. So a lot to be excited once we get through this COVID situation.
Had an extra rope on that one. We've got a question from Mark Paganini, operating partner Mark Paganini. You can answer this question for the whole industry, not from Milestone. What is the level of lease returns or cancellations in 2020 compared to 2019? Did you see a lot across the industry?
No, I think going back to what I said at the start, it's just like, I think we sort of almost prepared ourselves for the worst at the start of when the COVID started. We didn't know what to expect. We didn't know what will be the impact on, our operators. But yeah, we didn't have to get any aircraft back due to the crisis, really. I think the worst we had to do was kind of, find the solutions for a short period of time where, the hours were dropping and the revenue were not there anymore. But that didn't last for long at all, and that was very minimal for not even the major operators, to be honest. So I don't think anyone else has seen any aircraft coming back really massively. Less placements for the existing supply, but not aircraft coming back.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Sebastien. That was great.
Thank you so much.
Right, so Steve, you've already had a plug from Sebastien, so I'm going to hand over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, Al. Good afternoon, everybody.
What do you want to talk about today?
So, yeah, look, I I'll just share my screen up. I think, first of all, just a little bit around activity levels. I think that's been touched upon already. Sebastian's touched upon it there, and I've got some data as of last Friday on that. A little bit around what's happening in oil and gas, and then of course I'll happily plug the new renewable energy stuff as well. Let me just share my screen and see if this works. Okay, so I think look, as I say, I think there's several things happening this year. I think, looking back over the last 6 months, it's been pretty evident that there's a move within certain energy companies, governments, and other organisations towards the energy transition, which I think is very real. Sort of the impact of that for the oil and gas business is that for some companies, oil has become a dirty word, as it were, and you see a lot of effectively really oil companies trying to relabel themselves as energy businesses, or spend an awful lot of time marketing some sort of pretty niche things they're doing at the margin. But I think what we've seen in the last month is that there's work to be done there, and I think perhaps the Western Europe perspective on oil isn't necessarily reflective of what we see in the wider world. On the on the coronavirus crisis, I think last time we spoke, it's kind of raising the question about whether a second wave is going to impact the rotorcraft business, and I've got some data on that in a minute. I don't think it necessarily does. And then on renewables, obviously we've spent the last 6 months, give or take, looking at the renewable energy business. Not just myself, there's been 4 of us working on it, but primarily myself, George Venturis, who's perhaps on this call, and a colleague, Paul Newman. But we've spent a lot of time looking at the renewables business from the ground up, and I'll share some thoughts there. But look, I think in terms of the flights activity, and this is not hours, this is number of flights year on year for heavy and super medium aircraft. Look, I think when we were speaking in May and speaking in July, we were at some pretty significant level of downturn in flight activity, more than 30%. It was averaging through the late spring and summer months. But what we've really seen since August actually is a recovery of activity, which is a mix of people moving from, I suppose, panic mode and shut everything down to a minimum mode to what I would call adaptation mode. So instead of having to have fewer people offshore or fewer people on aircraft, you've got measures were taken to ensure that people could carry on working but safely. And I saw one of the operators in October, and their operation was like it was like walking into the local hospital. There was temperature checks before you go in. There was separation of people inside the terminal. There were perspex screens everywhere. Everything was spotlessly clean. I think this industry's learned to adapt, and that's allowed it to return to almost normal level of activity. I think if we look at the last few weeks, the 3-week moving average is sitting between 5-10% down on where it was a year before, which is actually, I think, a pretty good success story for this business when you consider the amount of distress it was in back in May and back in June. I think it's again probably fair to say that this level of activity isn't really uniform across the world. Again, since the last time we were speaking to you, I think we've seen further units leave the UK on the S92 side. So the one that was behind my head a second ago, which is one of Sebastien's units, I think 237. That's been moved to Norway and re-registered as LNOQU. But we've seen on the super medium side, 2 deliveries of H175s last month. I believe both of those are Milestone units as well. And on the 175 fleet for oil and gas, pretty much every single aircraft is being utilised. I think apart from one, that's one of the very early units that Airbus had that's being sold by Blueberry. But there's been new units entering the market, which is quite remarkable when you consider what's happened, both on the S92 and super medium side. And I think so far what we're seeing is that second wave of the coronavirus, and obviously here in the UK it's been pretty stark last couple of months, but that hasn't translated into a second activity downturn, as we saw back in May and June, which I think is a function of just the work that's been done. So, as I said earlier, the European oil majors are treading a very careful tightrope. They're managing cash. They're still in, downturn cash preservation mode. So they're managing capex. I don't think we'll see capex in the upstream business much above 340 billion this year. So probably fairly flat, maybe slight increase, but not so much. Substantial growth there, but the oil prices are pretty decent. We're at $55 a barrel Brent today. Those oil prices, the E&P companies are making good money. They've got positive free cash flow. In the US, we've had a change of leader there, change of administration. There's been a lot of press about the pause on new licenses in the US Gulf of Mexico, which I think pretty much everyone was expecting, but again, in the background, quietly, there's still, a good couple of dozen, near enough, drilling permits have been issued for the offshore areas in the US, the Gulf of Mexico, since Biden has come to the office. So you've kind of got this strange market really, where no one wants to talk about oil and gas activity because it's not in favour or not well favoured. But you've got people kind of quietly getting on with it in the background, and you've seen rig reactivations in Canada, Guyana, Suriname, Brazil, Egypt, all the countries that are listed there on the screen. Some of the press releases are verging on comical from some of these drilling companies when they announce their rigs going back to work. You've seen some in recent days where the rig company will say, our rig's going back to work for an undisclosed client, and it'll be generally pretty obvious who it is, but they're trying to keep their name away from oil and gas, which is bizarre given that it's their primary business. So I think look, I'm not one of these evangelical people about renewable energy. I think it's a very interesting part of the market, but I think the way I would see the energy transition is this kind of two-tier energy transition where you've got fairly limited demand growth in the European Union and United States, which means you probably will see energy switching for power generation, and then potentially conversion into other types of fuels. But for the vast majority of the world's population, you've got population growth, you've got an increase in prosperity, and you've got an overall increase in energy demand as expected by likes of the IEA under the stated policy scenario. So I think in that for that proportion of the world, which is is the majority in terms of population, that means renewables become part of the mix rather than offsetting anything else necessarily. And then on the offshore wind side, definitely 10 years ago, 15 years ago, this was a cottage industry with small projects being installed 5, 6, 7 kilometers from shore. In the process of putting this recent report together, I think went through 1,300 projects, just an astonishing volume of activity that's either being built out just now or is on the drawing board coming forward. And it's primarily the UK, China, Germany, USA that's going to be leading that activity. But of course, the interesting bit of all of this is, what does this mean for rotorcraft, and why will this industry, which has previously been shipping people out, in tin cans, use helicopters? And I think, actually the value proposition for helicopters is really strong. I mean, most of the activity today has been in the North Sea, and with the wave heights in the North Sea, particularly in the winter, you have a far higher availability for the helicopter than you do for vessels. You can actually get to your wind farm in the first place. You can get there far faster, obviously. Most importantly, the rate of accidents offshore transferring crew with helicopters is nearly zero. They're by far the safest way of transporting people offshore, and perhaps surprisingly, they're the least polluting method of transporting people as well. So both for heli hoisting and crew transfer applications, they emit anything from a third to half what you would be emitting using a vessel. So I think there's a really strong argument for the use of helicopters. And I think, again, 3 or 4 years ago, it would have been difficult to find helicopter specialists in some of the major OEMs and wind farm developers. But actually looking at it now, if you look at likes of an Ørsted or a Vestas or Vattenfall, all of these companies have now got helicopter experts in house. They understand the value proposition. They understand how to best use these aircraft. So I think the stage is set for quite a remarkable period of growth for not just the offshore wind business, but the rotorcraft business as well. And you see on the screen here, I think everyone knows the who's who at the zoo just now, but there's obviously huge growth in China. COHC are going to take at least 2 135s, we understand, this year, probably more. And you've got other large rotorcraft operators that have made no secret of their interest in offshore wind. If you look at the last Bristow quarterly report or quarterly presentation, there's a whole page in there on offshore wind. So if we plot out all the projects over time and look at the distance from shore, the size and the status, it's pretty obvious you've got a trend for increasing distance from shore. You've got by 2030 nearly half of the turbines will be more than 30 kilometers from shore. And a vast number of projects and a vast additional capacity being brought online. So we'll have, give or take, 300 gigawatts of capacity by 2030, with $500 billion being spent on the wind farms. In terms of the rotorcraft themselves, I think this is quite an interesting story. Sorry for the slightly crazy colours here, but you've got a current fleet at peak last year was about 29 aircraft. We're expecting that to grow to 126 aircraft by 2030. The majority of this is light and medium twins, so 135s, 145s, 189s for heli hoisting applications. but you've also got a certain amount of construction support, which obviously comes and goes depending on how many wind farms are being built out at any time. And that's going to be 139s. We've seen super mediums used in the past, and of course last week CHC were announcing they're going to use an S92 for some of that crew change activity as well. So I think it's important to say that the vast majority of this is heli hoisting. It's heli hoisting in wave conditions where you want latest modern aircraft. So I don't think this is going to be a dumping ground for unused oil and gas aircraft. I'm not sure how many of Sebastien's S92s will find a home in this market, but I do think this is a good story for the light and medium twin markets, and a good story for hopefully the OEMs that are servicing this business as well. So that's what I had to say there. Al, I think the market's holding up pretty well in terms of oil and gas. I think there's some good news if you look for it and you kind of look beneath the surface of some of the marketing efforts of the oil companies. And then I think you've got some sectors where actually there is quite impressive growth, and I think that's a positive story for this business going forward.
That's brilliant, Steve. Thanks for that. And we should stress that your reports, 8 months of report, 8 months of research with team of people. We've got a question from Sarah at Ascend by Sirium. Have you got an estimate for how many wind farms any one helicopter can serve?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So in the modelling that we put together, we factored in for some areas there'd be clustering of activity. Some of these larger wind farm developers have got several projects that are nearby and that will share logistics. So that's the short answer is yes. The long answer is it's complicated, because in some parts of the world you might need dedicated aircraft for a single wind farm, and in other parts of the world you may well service several with one helicopter. Complicating that even further is that some of these developers are going to use a combination of vessels and helicopters in the logistics phase. So you can, in terms of overall operational expenditure, it's actually not a lot different to the oil and gas industry. I think in the oil and gas industry it's about 3% rotorcraft spend of overall O&M, and in offshore wind it'll be about 2%, but that's averaged across all the wind farms. And of course you're going to have a fairly small proportion of them using rotorcraft. So on an individual wind farm basis, it's either going to be 0 or a much larger number than 2%. But look, I'm happy to have a call with Sarah and speak to that a bit longer, but it's a sort of a half-hour conversation rather than a 5-minute answer.
When you looked at the environmental benefits of helicopters, did you also factor in the blades moving the turbines around, so generating energy? As you came past, I'm joking. Is the wind?
Right? Yeah. No. Yeah.
We've got a much more serious question from Mark Schechter, Managing Director of Thora Capital. Airbus said in 2018 that by 2040, the wind industry would require 1,000 helicopters worth 10 billion. Your forecast is far more conservative. You're forecasting that by 2030, half the time period, 100 helicopters are needed, so 1 billion of value. What gives is Mark's question.
Yeah, I think what I would say here is that we've gone through a very granular process of building up on a bottom-up basis, wind farm by wind farm basis, a very detailed assessment of what rotorcraft we think will be required. And we've brought people into the team that have got extensive experience of working within operators, like CHC, for example, who have worked on wind farm tenders and who have modelled this market for some of the largest wind farm operators in the world. It's not my job to sell helicopters. It's my job to give an unbiased view of what we think is going to happen. I would also say that our forecast is for the crew transfer and the heli hoisting aspect only, so it doesn't include HEMS or search and rescue, which the Airbus number might include. I should say I've reached out to Airbus and I've got an ongoing dialogue with them when we're trying to arrange a call for probably a couple of weeks' time to kind of compare notes. So look, I'm not saying that anyone else has done this wrong. I think we've gone about it in a robust and defendable way, and I'm again happy to do a longer call with anyone else on a one-to-one basis to explain how that works. And if it's 1,000 helicopters by 2040, great. I think again, that would be a positive, be a fantastic story for the business. But we've done it the way we think it should be done, if that makes sense.
Maybe they're all coming between 2030 and 2040.
Yeah, perhaps, yeah.
Got a question from Jeremy Fitton, CEO of Skylifter. He's got a very innovative heavier than air, lighter than air thing concept. For offshore heli hoist, what weight of payloads are common? Do you have that, Steve?
So for the heli hoist, what the operators want to be able to do is take 2 crews of 3 people plus tools. The tools vary; it can be quite heavy. That's the kind of the ideal scenario. So yeah, you can kind of back that out from there. There's a kind of implied, or 2 implied questions with that as well, which is how do you maximize the weight carrying capacity of your aircraft? Some of these aircraft, as everyone on this call will be well aware, are capable of being flown by 1 pilot, right? As far as we're aware, no one's doing that at the moment, but there's another 80 kilograms, or depending on how much cake your pilot's eaten, or so of weight there. I think the other thing in this market as well is on inspection, and I got a good email come through this week. It was asking about the inspection market. So I think there's almost certainly a UAV sort of application here for doing wind farm inspection, wind turbine inspection, which again, look, we haven't factored that into the forecast. So I think that's all all upside on what we've looked at.
Okay, for a question from Guillaume at 360 Consulting. Any insight regarding contractual arrangement for wind farms, seasonal, long-term, fixed monthly fee?
Yeah. So there's, I would say there's kind of 2 tiers of wind farm operators. There's ones that have come from the oil and gas industry that understand, they're going to be paying a standing monthly charge and an hourly rate for the aircraft. Probably the funniest conversation I had when I started asking operators about this was with one operator that said they'd spent a long time working on a bid for a wind farm operator. They'd sent the bid off, and virtually 10 minutes after they'd sent it off, they got a phone call asking if there was a decimal point in the wrong place. So I know, again, I would just say what I said earlier, which is that some wind farm developers understand the rotorcraft applications, end use, and commercial terms very well, and some of them are still on that learning curve, really trying to get to grips with what these things cost to own and operate, but also equally how to deploy them to get the most value out of them.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Steve. That was great. And your report's available on the Air and Sea Analytics website.
Yeah, I'll provide a copy of these slides for you as well, so you can share those.
Brilliant. We'll send those out. Thanks so much, Steve. We're having problems with Clark McGinn. We may have to change back to the old platform, I think, to get Clark on. I don't know what's going on. And I know Clark's beavering away and briefly appeared. But before then, delighted to have Conor from PwC Ireland. Conor, how are you?
Good. Thank you, Al, and hi everyone from Dublin. We're like the rest of Europe and beyond, just looking at the vaccine rollout and hoping that some of the recent delays are solved. But other than that, the things are good.
Yeah, it's dragging on. So Conor, lots of people know you, and also because you did work for a lessor. But do you want to give us a little bit of info on PwC's helicopter and aviation practice?
Sure. Thanks, Al. So maybe just to start, obviously, PwC, as those will know, is obviously a established kind of Big Four audit and tax advisory firm. But and whilst they're kind of key offerings of ours and continue to be in the broader aviation sector and obviously in Rotor as well. In the last couple of years, in the last probably 3 to 4 years, we've built out quite a significant aviation advisory business in Dublin, which is led by a number of industry veterans. Those of you who know the fixed wing side of the business might know Colin Carr. The likes of Dick Forsberg, ex of Avalon, is one of our consultants. So and that business, what we've seen, Al, is obviously for the existing players and for those who are in the sector already, maybe our own lens maybe of more limited benefit, but for newer investors, those who maybe have been looking to come into the aviation asset class over the last number of years. Obviously we've seen on the fixed wing side, it's been quite a hot sector for maybe 10 years until COVID and lease rate factors, we're on the floor as a result. What we have seen through the crisis, is a lot of institutional money, PE type money that maybe has wanted to come into the sector for a long period of time, but maybe the risk adjusted returns weren't there. So we're certainly seeing interest across aviation generally. Obviously to date, with the way there's been such an uncertainty with respect to COVID, a lot of the deals that we've seen on the wider aviation side have either been with the better credits, your tier one airlines like your Wizz Airs, Deltas, EasyJets. We've obviously seen purchase leasebacks with the likes of those clients, and increasingly over the last 6 months. And maybe maybe this is probably more relevant to the rotor sector. We've seen quite a lot of interest on the cargo side in particular. Obviously conscious that cargo still continues to fly. E-commerce is obviously, if anything, it's taken off, or it's the likes of Amazon, FedEx have that demand. So, both on the cargo side, on the cargo conversion side, where there's a supply constraint, there's only a certain number of conversion providers. We're seeing, a lot of interest there from maybe newer money looking to come in, and they can obviously see certainty of income on that side, because you don't have to put bums on seats like you do, on the passenger aircraft side, which obviously I think we'll all admit is probably a bit of runway before it's going to come back. So, I'd say on the rotor side, obviously, the industry is obviously aware of the challenges driven in the main by oil and gas over the last 5 to 6 years. But I think given the level of interest in the broader aviation sector and investors potentially seeing the ability to come in at the right price point, I have the same view on rotor, like that. That opportunity exists, and I know some of those who've come in the last couple of years on the sidecar type deals have maybe had the same investment thesis. So that's maybe just a viewpoint. But I guess in terms of PwC, like what we can do is obviously, as I said, that investor support, helping newer investors evaluate transactions, and support them on that. We do work on the financing side to date, mostly on the fixed wing side, arranging for financing for airlines, and for certain maybe smaller lessors. And obviously there's a piece of work around, as Big Four firms traditionally would do, around restructuring type efforts. And even at the moment, it's interesting with Norwegian and their court process in Ireland and certain other lessors. It's really a throwback to 3 or 4 years ago in the case of CHC, and obviously more recently in the case of some of the other operators. So it's interesting, the parallels between the sectors, and how rotor can maybe instruct what's going on some of the fixed wing side at present.
So do you think we may get investors looking at fixed wing coming into real assets, which is the looking at commercial going, it's too early to make a call, but then being attracted to helicopters because of things Sebastien and Steve and Will have said?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously the key is the price point that you come in at, and obviously, that may be challenging for some of the existing players depending on when they came in themselves. But I think certainly as you look at the asset class compared to wider fixed wing aircraft, obviously it's more attractive now. If you can establish that certainty of income, so depending on the mission, depending on the contracts, I think there's certainly an investment proposition there. Now clearly that's obviously the challenge, because that might be the more attractive deals that those on the call everyone is chasing. So there's obviously some of the underlying challenges that that maybe remain in the sector, but there's equally strong points that maybe we sometimes fail to acknowledge, like the OEM supply discipline over the last few years, relative to say other sectors. So you look at fixed wing now, and whilst there's probably anyone can, there's various estimates as to the proportion of the global fleet that may need to be retired soon. But at the end of the day, Airbus and Boeing are still bringing through a lot of new deliveries, whereas I'd contrast that with what I've seen on the rotor side in the last few years, and there's obviously much more discipline there. Now there's its own reasons. So I think we're seeing that. So I mean, I think if you look at the broader aviation sector and you're looking at the investment proposition and for maybe that newer institutional money looking to come in, I think maybe rotor is in a stronger position, relatively speaking, than pre-COVID. So I see that as a positive, but obviously time will tell in terms of what comes through on the transaction side.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Conor. That's an optimistic ending. It's been optimistic throughout. Sebastien, Will, Steve, any more comments? Yes, Sebastien?
No, all good. Thank you.
No, just looking forward to seeing everybody real soon, hopefully, and hope we can all do some business together this year.
Steve, I've got a question from you, from Jeremy Parkin. You love the S92. The Parapex Media Turbine Helicopter Database notes a fourth S92 arriving Aberdeen yesterday for parting out. 21 S92s currently stored in Europe and 17 stored elsewhere in the world. What is the future of the S92?
Yeah, that's a great question from Jeremy, who's I think the way you need to think about this fleet is you've got a large volume of aircraft. I say large. You've got a substantial volume or value of aircraft that's been sitting there. Some of them for more than 2 years. I think of the aircraft that are not flying at the moment, probably 9 or 10 of those are not gonna fly again. Some of them have been damaged and are probably not commercially repairable, and Germany knows as I do which ones those are. And there's others that are just simply too expensive to return to service, especially when you've got cheaper alternatives to do so in the meantime. I think we've seen the utilizations held up reasonably well in this market, but there's an overhang of capacity, and that overhang of capacity is basically everybody's problem, because it's hard for Leonardo or Airbus to go off and sell these new oil and gas super mediums when they're when there's very cheap 92s in the market. I think the other thing that's not really been talked about very much is what's been happening in Brazil, with super mediums going into that market at low rates as well, of around 100,000 a day. Those units coming in, there's going to be clearly stuff coming out as well as part of the recent Petrobras tenders. So there's, I think in the immediate term, there's going to be some aircraft coming out of Brazil that will need to find a home as well. I think if you look at other oil and gas oilfield services markets, they've been taking capacity out of the market throughout the downturn, and that just hasn't happened, apart from a very small handful of aircraft. It just hasn't happened in the rotary markets. And I think there's 3 companies really that can actually do that. Which is Sikorsky themselves, Milestone and Macquarie. And they've got to make that decision around whether you hang on to an aircraft for another 4 years, 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, however long it's going to take to get it utilized, or whether you try and extract some economic value out of it some other way, to the benefit of the rest of the fleet. You've got to say that over the last 6 months, there really hasn't. You've not had not very good outcomes in terms of some of the tendering that's been going on. I mean, we've spoken before about Brazil, about Denmark and other places, and I think that's going to be done to death. But there's basically three actors there that can actually influence the market, and they obviously can't act together for obvious reasons to do that. But there's going to need to be some intervention for that to come back quickly. So that the flip side of that is, if you think about some of these frontier areas like Argentina, Mexico, well, the deep water parts of Mexico at least, Suriname, you've got exploration activity happening in frontier areas, which is going to require search and rescue aircraft. It's going to require crew transfer aircraft. The last time there was drilling in the Falklands, I believe there were 3 Bristow S-92s down there supporting that work. Jeremy will correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure. So the way I would start to think about it is, you've got these pockets of geographic areas where they're remote. It's not like Aberdeen where, an additional well might mean you just kind of fit that in with the existing fleet of aircraft you've got. When you go to these frontier aircraft, you need an aircraft, first of all. You need a backup aircraft, or you might need search and rescue aircraft as well. So I would start thinking about it in units of 2 and 3 that can be deployed, and how many projects there are around the world that can absorb those aircraft. And I think if you start doing it on that basis, you can build a bridge, with the visible activity of projects over there. You can build a bridge, that gets you to a balanced market, probably 2024, realistically. We've got a report on this coming out in a couple of months, but so it's going to be a few years is the short answer, unless someone does something dramatic, which is only going to be one of 3 companies.
Will, do you want comments on the S-92 quickly?
The heavy market, there's been transactions, and I think it's mainly due to pricing becoming more realistic, and there are buyers. So I think we'll see more transactions in 2021, and I imagine to see it happen. Great.
Thanks so much, Conor, Sebastien, Will, and Steve. Apologies again for the technical issues with Clark. Thanks so much for joining us. If you'd like to go network, please stay online and you can chat at tables. Stay safe. Thanks very much, and look forward to seeing you all in 2021. We're now scheduling Helicopter Investor London for September, so hopefully we'll be able to see everyone face to face then. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Al. Thanks,
Al.